The Magicka Sorcerer has definitely been up there as one of the best classes for PvE in the Elder Scrolls Online. It was super popular in the recent Flames of Ambition patch, and I don't see this changing now either moving forward. 107k DPS was hit with a good mixture of new gear and old foundations. You'll easily be able to adjust if you followed my video in the Flames of Ambition DLC, and if you wanted to use the same gear sets as before, you'll also do a great job as well. Hi, this is Liko and welcome to my Magicka Sorcerer PVE build and rotation video for the Blackwood Chapter. Today we are going to showcase a really strong setup which makes some good use of the new gear that's dropping with Blackwood, including Bahsei's Mania from the new trial and also the new Mythic, the Harpooner's Wading Kilt. These builds are a baseline which can be and should be adjusted to your needs. I'll suggest a few different gear and weapon combinations along the way to help you make that decision. I'll also talk briefly about the skills that you can slot, the how and why, the alternatives, and I'll also go through the combat metrics and Blue CP Slottables after showing the rotation and the Parse. Many thanks to Aerenel for providing us with the Parse and all the details with it. Some of you may remember that Aerenel contributed way back during the Dragonhold patch nearly 2 years ago when I first started to have guest passes on the channel, so welcome back Aerenel. Thanks to the 23% of you guys out there who have already subscribed, it massively helps the channel grow, so I really do appreciate it. If you aren't currently a subscriber, it would honestly make my day if you could. If I've helped you in any way, do consider becoming a patron, which helps me to keep this channel going, as well as Liko.gg running smoothly. Alright, so let's very quickly go through the fundamentals of race, Mundus stone, food, and attribute points. Choice of race. The three outstanding races are Khajiit, Altmer, and Dunmer. To get the best results, go with any of the three. Other races will not be quite as good, but none worse than 5% behind. Choice of Mundus stone. In most cases, you'll probably want to pick the Thief Mundus stone. The number of critical damage sources has increased, so you'll want to make the most of that. If you are frequently using the Acuity set in your fights, then you could consider the Shadow instead, but otherwise, to keep things simple, go with the Thief Mundus stone. Choice of food. There are three different things to look for in food that is good to use in PvE, with a trade-off between benefits in max HP, max Magicka, and Magicka recovery. The Arteum Pickled Fish Bowl was the definitive go-to for a max HP max Magicka setup, but its stats have been reduced to more or less equal to a blue food equivalent, such as Mistral Banana Bunny Hash, as you can see. Pick this food if you want survivability and damage, though it does not give any Magicka recovery bonuses. On the other end of the spectrum, the Ghastly Eyeball food is the one which gives max Magicka and Magicka recovery, but no HP bonuses. This is the go-to when you practice on a target dummy, as the sustain is quite necessary, but also a good choice when you don't necessarily need the extra HP. The Clockwork Citrus Fillet is the middle ground, giving a little bit of everything. Placement of attribute points. Generally, you should go ahead and put 64 points into Magicka here. If you feel like you need a little bit more HP here and there, you can always add a few points into HP. You can also use different food choices previously mentioned, as it's generally more convenient to do so. Okay, great, so now let's take a look at this Magicka Sorcerer build. For gear, let's talk about firstly what we are using for the Parse in the video, and afterwards I'll list some potential alternatives. We are using a one-piece monster helm, and the standout here is one-piece sniper roar since it gives crit chance and it gives more than any other piece. We then have the Harpooner's Wading Kilt, which is the new Mythic item, and the condition should be pretty easy to keep up in most circumstances, and there's a good amount of crit chance and crit damage to be gained here. We then have 5 pieces of Bahsei's Mania, which is the new Magicka set from the Rockgrove trial. This set performs better if your Magicka pool is lower, as it is stronger the lower it is. Up to 15% bonus damage is honestly pretty good, and you should probably be okay either front barring or double barring this set, since we don't spend too much time on the back bar for this particular build and rotation. We are double barring it here to go with Sororia, but if you wanted to pair it with Soro, then you could front bar Bahsei's instead. Either way, no biggie. Our other 5 piece is Sororia, which is our classic bread and butter, where you do best if you can stand in a circle once in a while. Here we are using 2 daggers, with none honed in the main hand and precise in the offhand, though double precise is also fine, as is the use of axes now, which have been slightly buffed. And as before, if you don't want to or cannot use dual wield weapons, then definitely go with an Inferno Staff instead, you will do just fine. The Maelstrom Arena Staff is our buckbow weapon as always, and this buffs our light attacks when the Wall of Elements is down. Alternatives then: Mother Sorrow, Medusa, False God, Burning Spellweave, and a new crafted set called Diamond's Victory. These are some of the best alternative 5p sets. Sorrow is best on body, Medusa, Burning Spellweave and Diamond's Victory are probably best value front barred, but whatever works, you can mix and match rather easily. Zarn and Domi House, or simply 2 crit chance pieces, are your best alternatives for monster set 2 pieces if you cannot or will not use the new Mythic. Now let's take a peek at these skills, and I'll go through those that we will use in this pass for this particular rotation, and also discuss some alternatives along the way, of which there are plenty of viable solutions. First we have Daedric Prey. It doesn't do any upfront damage, but after 6 seconds it explodes, doing all the damage at once. At all costs, do not recast this skill again before it goes off. This skill synergizes nicely with the build since it can boost damage of both summoned pets and the Storm Atro ultimate as well. Next we have Crystal Fragments. This is our main spammable, or in fact for this build, this is our only spammable. There are 2 parts of this skill. By default it is a channel cast, but when casting any Magicka costing ability, including Crystal Frags itself, you have a 35% chance of getting a Crystal Frag proc, which is a cheaper, more powerful instant cast. You can perfectly weave this channel cast without losing time on your global cooldowns, providing your timing is good. I would say try finding the sweet spot where you can queue up the next light attack, not too early so that it doesn't fire at all, and not too late where you actually lose time. One thing that doesn't change though is the difficulty in bar swapping during a channeled cast of this ability, so I would still not recommend doing that. If you do need to, then you can try this. After casting a channel frag, queue up another light attack on the same bar, then bar swap, then cast your back bar skill. It's still not perfect, but you will likely lose less time this way. If you need to block a lot, then this channeled skill will be a bit of a pain to use as well, and in these cases, and in general if you just want to use a normal spammable, then you can slot Elemental Weapon or Force Pulse in place of one of the other skills. Mage's Wrath, this is our class execute, and well, to be honest, it's not the best execute out there when you compare it to the Nightblade's Impale for example, but we decided to slot it here to show how it looks since it's been a while. This is probably your first candidate on the front bar to replace if you wanted to use one of these spammables that we discussed just a few seconds ago. You could also use Daedric Mines as a magic dump if you wanted to reduce your current magic pool, which is relevant when it comes to Bahsei's Mania. Next we have the Scamp pet. Volatile Familiar. It does pretty good damage on its own, but if you activate it, it does AoE shock damage every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. Pretty damn strong. This skill must be slotted on both bars. We also have a Twilight Tormentor pet, which does really good single target damage. Again, this must be double barred. You can activate it for extra damage to enemies above 50% HP only, which is not necessarily worth casting during the middle of rotation, but certainly is before a fight or if there's some downtime in the fight where the boss is not damageable. In mini boss fights, you may consider slotting only one pet for various reasons, such as the need for bar space, or if the pets historically don't perform well in certain situations. In AoE fights, you'll more likely want to select the Scamp, since the Twilight doesn't have any real AoE damage. In single target fights, you may want the opposite here, since we consider that the Scamp has to kind of walk to its target, which can take time, whereas the Twilight is usually better at switching targets more quickly. That extra bar space can be used to slot important things such as a shield, or a heal such as Surge, or an extra dot such as Degeneration or Scalding Rune. There are plenty of options. Anyway, the ultimate that we use on this bar is the Greater Storm Atro, best single target ultimate in the game, and provides a nice synergy for others too. The Atro also gets Mage Berserk if activated, which is also a nice little bonus. On the back bar then, firstly we have Unstable Wall, which when down, light attacks are really strong on enemies affected by it, thanks to the Maelstrom staff. Next we have Boundless Storm. It's a really nice skill overall, doing pretty good damage per cast, seeing as it lasts 23 seconds, but also gives resists and a burst of Major Expedition too. The one thing I personally don't like about this skill is that your character glows bright blue and you can't really see what you're doing. We then have Barbed Trap, which is a stamina costing dot that also provides Minor Force, which is nice. As mentioned earlier, you can use Medusa on the front bar and drop this skill to free up some bar space if needed. We then have our 2 pets, which are of course double barred. On our back bar, we are able to slot a different ultimate if needed, such as a Destro ultimate if cleavage damage is more important than single target DPS for a particular instance. So onto the pass. I'll give a few tips about the rotation itself, and then a thing or two about managing Magicka for Bahsei's in raid. So firstly, note how we start the encounter by casting Channeled Acceleration. This gives us 36 seconds of minor force, which means we don't necessarily need to cast Barb Trap right away when we enter the fight, after we swap that skill back in. If you're using Medusas, then you won't need to worry about this part at all. This is a pretty common thing to do in real encounters, so no harm in practicing it here this way too. Of course, it's a lot more practical on PC with the add-ons that we have, as opposed to on console where we don't have such a luxury. After this, you can precast the 2 pets, and then Boundless Storm, and then your Storm Aerenel ultimate, and then continue on into the rotation. You want to make sure that you keep up your Unstable Wall, Barbed Trap, and Boundless Storm on your back bar so that they keep ticking. If you want to keep it simple, if you cast Unstable Wall every 10 seconds, then you can recast Barbed Trap and Boundless Storm together every other Unstable Wall cast. This is because bar swapping can be a little bit tricky, since you'll want to avoid doing so on a Crystal Frag channeled cast. On the front bar, you'll want to keep up Daedric Prey as close to every 6 seconds as you can, though you want to take care not to refresh as early, since if you do, it won't do any damage at all. Similarly, you'll want to recast your Scamp every 10 seconds, though it's not such a big deal here if you recast a little early or a little late. If you get a frag prop at the same time as needed to cast something else, then it's really up to you, but you're probably better off prioritizing the frag proc, since then you'll be able to get another chance to proc it again. You don't have the opportunity to stack unused procs, if that makes sense, but again, doesn't really matter either way. On the dummy, you won't want to recast the Twilight Tormentor, and in many fights you won't either. But it is worth to precast before a fight, and in real fights where there is downtime on the boss, such as when a dragon is flying around in Sunspire, or during the Shade mechanic in the second boss on Leakoff. The rest of the time you'll want to cast Crystal Frags. And this is the general pattern until you reach 20% here, where you'll want to replace a Crystal Frags channeled cast with Mage's Wrath, or Execute. That is, if you have it slotted. I did leave a static rotation that you can follow in the description below, however, seeing as every player now has access to proper dot timers, you might actually find it easier to go with a slightly dynamic rotation instead, as I've described just now. When it comes to Bahseis, you might want to apply a few of these tips when you practice on a dummy, and more especially when it comes to a raid situation, because in many cases your sustain in a 12-person raid with all of the group support ready and available is greater than solo on this dummy. For example, you can try not slotting the recovery CP slottable in the red tree. You can also use mines as a second spammable instead of the execute, since it costs a lot. You can also avoid taking synergies until you are less than around 30% of your remaining Magicka pool, although this is more relevant to like the shard or combustion synergy, and I would still continue to go ahead and take, for example, the grave robber synergy from a necromancer whenever it appears, since it does do a great deal of damage. Anyway, that's all I had to say for now. I hope you enjoy the Parse, and I'll catch up with you at the end of it to go through the CMX and the Blue Champion Point Slottables. Alright, so let's take a look at the breakdown of the Parse. Light attacks, around 20% of your DPS, pretty standard, and that's the kind of number you should be aiming for. The Crystal Frags in this case makes up 23% of our DPS, and if you look at average casts, you can see that the prot cast is doing roughly nearly double the damage of a channeled cast, which shows the importance of using a frag proc when you get them. And of course it's RNG as well, since it's all down to chance. And if you aren't using the execute, then you should get a higher proportion of crystal frag damage overall. Pets make up around 27% of the total DPS, which is really good considering so much of that damage is passive. And looking at the execute, you can see that there are 2 portions, of which an average casted around 75k, which is and has been traditionally all this time been around the same damage as a crystal frag proc. The new Blue CP Slottables then, fighting Finesse, Deadly Aim, Backstabber and Master at Arms are chosen. Master at Arms is a new addition to the CP system which would have replaced Thaumaturge from last patch, which you can slot if Backstabber isn't working for you for a particular scenario, such as in Sunspire. Cool, so that's all I have for now for the Magicka Sorcerer in Blackwood. Do check out Liko.gg for more on the Magicka Sorcerer from others, both in terms of builds and also gameplay videos. Be sure to subscribe, like and comment on the video to help me out, or consider becoming a patron, or perhaps check out another build of mine for Blackwood, of which you can find in the description below. And again, a lot more is on Liko.gg from myself, plus many other creators as well. Anyway, thanks for watching this video today. This is Liko. Have a good day, and I'll see you soon.